Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Pragmatic Podcasts. My name is Diane Pierson, and I am an instructor with Pragmatic. Today, I have the very great good fortune to have Joe Douress with us to talk about customer retention. In any renewal business, any business where renewals are a factor, this is top of mind. And it can be one of the most frustrating parts of the business. So I'm really excited to have Joe here because I've worked with Joe, many different times in my career, as has my husband, Tom. And we've both had the ability to witness firsthand his inspirational leadership style and this laser focus he has on delivering value to the market as well as revenue to his business partners through this use of data. I would even go so far as to say that Joe is one of the defining pioneers of leveraging data to make business decisions, marketing, sales, what have you. Right now, today, Joe is the head of sales, marketing, and customer engagement for British Medical Publishing for the Americas. He's held some general management roles in the past. He's worked with companies in the general management area. Okay, I'm just going to start that again.
Sure.
So Joe is currently the starting again.
Take three. Take your time.
Joe is head of sales, marketing, and customer engagement for British Medical Publishing for the Americas. He's also held general management roles at companies like Elsevier, Buyers Lab, Dun & Bradstreet, and LexisNexis. He has worked in these fields for many years. As a matter of fact, at one point co-authoring a top-selling business book, The D&B Guide to Doing Business Around the World by Prentice Hall, Simon & Schuster. He's testified before a U.S. congressional subcommittee to promote better private and public sector cooperation. And believe it or not, this gentleman actually has some spare time. And in his spare time, he founded the Heroes Tournament, which has raised $500,000 to benefit seriously ill children as well as first responders who have fallen in the line of duty. So we have a great expert on the phone today, a great friend. Joe, thank you so much for being here to talk about customer retention.
Well, thank you, Diane. It's my pleasure, and it's great to be speaking with you again. And give my best to Tom.
I will. So let's kick this off talking about customer retention. What are some of the types of subscription or businesses where you've had to worry about customer retention? Just an overview of the kinds of things you've done in your career that were customer retention focused.
Well, every single business I've been with and in every single role I've been in, customer retention has been a priority. I think everybody listening to the podcast knows that a retained customer is about 500% or 5 times more profitable than bringing in a newly acquired customer. And, 1 point of improved retained revenue is worth more than that. It's probably worth about 10% of profit that flows to the bottom line. So retention has been at the forefront of everything that I've done, whether it was early in my career when I was with D&B. And then, when I moved over to other roles within the legal vertical, the education vertical, and now the healthcare vertical. I've worked for publicly owned companies. I've worked for private companies, and I've also worked for private equity-backed and private equity-owned businesses. And in every case, retention is a priority. I rely very heavily on data. And the data can't tell you everything. Obviously, there's a qualitative piece to this. You want to talk to customers. You want to understand both why they renew, and frankly, I think you learn more when you find out maybe why they don't renew. And so I've always made it, mission critical to always attempt to prove and improve the value proposition to our customers. Whether that was in any of the verticals I mentioned, it's different depending on what type of product or service or solution that you're taking to market. But at the end of the day, it always comes down to, does the customer feel like they are getting a good return on that investment? And the onus is on you to prove that to them. And don't expect them to invest the time to prove it to themselves. Sometimes they know it, sometimes they don't. So I rely pretty heavily on my marketing team and also my customer engagement team to promote the great value that our customers are getting. And equally important is when we identify, because we do look at the data very closely and very regularly, when we see a situation where we feel that a customer is not getting, commensurate value for their investment, then we have intervention things that we can do to maybe turn that around and turn that into a risky situation to one where we have much more confidence that that customer will renew.
Let's talk about a little bit about renewals, customer retention. We talk about it as renewals, so we're saying basically the same thing: renewal, retention. We're trying to keep these customers staying with us. Is there a critical time in the relationship with a customer or a pattern that you've seen where you would say that the customer retention could be made or broken?
Yeah.
At this point in the relationship, if we don't have them, it's going to be really hard to keep them.
Yeah. So again, it's curiosity, trying to understand where is that point where you may lose a customer. And without the data, all you're really doing is guessing. So, a few years back, I wanted to take a look at attrition rates from customers that were first-year customers, second-year customers, three-year customers, and on and on and on and on. And I think a lot of us know this. If you can keep a customer for about 3 years, there's a very good chance that you'll keep them long-term, maybe potentially for the next 10 years or more. And therein is where you get that lifetime value. Perhaps not surprisingly, but earlier in my career, it was surprising and really eye-opening to me, is where your first-year customers, I have found, are at the highest risk. There's lots of reasons for that. Some customers may have unusually high expectations in terms of how much value they're going to get in a single year. It's like a lot of things. It takes some time, perhaps, for that value to, sort of build over time. But I'm going to give you an actual case study. I won't name the business or the product, but it was in the legal vertical. And this particular business was growing at a very, very robust level. It was in the client development area. We helped law firms find clients. And it was at a time when we were making the transformation from print to web. And the business I was with at that time, I led a division in the small law area. And we were growing the business at more than 25% growth rate year over year early on. And we were bringing, and we were able to maintain that over a 4 to 5 year time horizon. But here's what's interesting: we were bringing in some years up to 6,000 new customers a year, and those 6,000 customers on an average contract value was in the $2,500 to $3,000 range, maybe a little bit more. But on an annual basis, we were bringing in anywhere from, let's say, $17 million to $21 million a year in new business. But when we started looking at the second-year retention rate, the retained revenue rate, we were all shocked to see that it was only at about a 51-52% range.
Wow.
Meanwhile, the business as a whole, and we had over 40,000 customers in total, the overall business had a retained revenue rate closer to 90%. But here we had those first-year customers that were attriting at a very, very high rate. And so in a sense, we were we were trying to sell too much, perhaps too soon. And so when we looked at the data, what we learned was that if you sold a subscription somewhere in that neighborhood of $2,400 to $3,000, you had a much better chance of retaining that revenue because the customer felt like that, what they were getting in return, let's say the number of leads that we would deliver to them, was absolutely commensurate with what they were paying for the service. Okay. But it was at this time where we were also developing lots of new products that law firms really were intrigued by and very eager to purchase. Ultimately, however, when we sold too much too soon, it almost was impossible for us to actually deliver enough value in that first year to justify that investment the second year. So while we had a sales team that was very eager to go out and not only sell a basic subscription, but to maybe sell an enhanced subscription, something that we might call an integrated legal marketing solution. It just made it very difficult to renew it in the second year because the price was too high and the value we were delivering just was not enough for that law firm to say, yeah, we're going to go for it a second year. A couple things we did around that. We sat down with the sales team, we explained the situation, but in addition to that, we actually we carved off a small group. I think it was 4 customer support reps whose focus went from just providing sort of general customer support, inbound calls from customers, to really focusing only on these first-year customers. We called it, I think, the Priority Services team. And they were focused exclusively on those first-year customers. And their goal was to be able to prove that the law firm was getting tangible value and a return on investment from that investment. And as a result, we saw the retained revenue rates actually go up in that very first year by 5 points. Now, that may not sound like a lot when you're going from 50% to 55%, but if you look at the numbers I just shared, somewhere in the $16 to $20 million range, a 5-point improvement in retention is real money.
Exactly. Well, and you brought up a couple great themes there, because it's an excellent case study, because it really illustrates that all retention is not created equal, and certain actions aren't going to work every single time when you look at retention tactics. And so diving into it and finding out that we actually have to encourage our sales teams to move more slowly. Don't try to go for the super big sale with the small law firms, because honestly, they're just not going to get enough out of it. But if you start with a smaller sale, you're going to be able to keep and grow this client, which also from a sales perspective is much easier than getting new business.
Absolutely.
I think that's, and putting that team in place to help with that. And that worked particularly well there. Whereas maybe that wasn't the answer for a different market. Maybe it wouldn't be the same answer for that same market 5 years from now. Maybe the reason you weren't retaining then would have been completely different. So I like that time element too, that whole concept of it might be because it's year 1. It might be something different in year 5. It might be something that happens in the industry. It might not be anything that has to do with our product. It just might be they can't ramp up fast enough to get enough out of it to get this, or maybe we can't ramp them up fast enough. But you reminded me of a scenario from my own background. Actually, I think it was a different part of the same company at the time, with, again, as you say, without naming names, but I found myself in an incredibly lucky situation. It was small law as well. And we were selling a software tool, and I was in charge of small law for this particular type of software. And what I had discovered was that clearly my boss hated me, because the other markets, medium law and then strategic law firms, their renewal rates were beyond 85%, both of them. And I think that the largest firms, it was something like 98%. I mean, it was just wonderful. Yep. Mine was 29%.
Wow.
And we hadn't done any work. They invested a lot of money, given us actually quite a bit of money to do marketing, to do onboarding. But when we actually got out and talked to the market, and then, we did some discovery. What I tell my classes all the time, once you start hearing the same thing over and over again, don't keep asking. Do a survey or an experiment, something quick and cheap. One of the things we found out was that nobody was actually asking them to renew. There was no method inside our company to ask them to renew.
Yeah.
Now that was just one of those lucky things you stumble into. It required much less effort than yours. It was just, okay, let's actually ask them to renew.
Right.
But you never know. And we had this budget for retention that we didn't actually need. Now, on the other hand, we also found out that market was using the product in an entirely different way than the smart ones, the ones who were renewing, not the smart ones, the ones who were renewing and had figured out how to use it on their own. That's what I mean by smart, not, you know what I mean. But they had figured out a way to use this thing that was providing them tremendous value. And all we had to do at that point was replicate that value message, get a few case studies, and we were able to shore up those renewals even farther. It became much more like the rest of the business. But it's interesting to hear the different reasons why maybe the very same law firm would or would not renew in one case with one type of product and not another. One size does not fit all here, does it?
No, it doesn't. And, at the end of the day, it always does come down to value. And I always like to say that value is like beauty. It truly is in the eye of the beholder. If there's one thing that will drive you absolutely crazy, it's when and you can empirically prove to a customer that they're getting tremendous value from their investment and they still cancel. And then on the other side of that coin, you may actually have a customer who is not getting great value, and yet they renew year after year after year after year. And that's because, depending on what it is that you're selling, years ago, I was the editor of a specialty directory that helped U.S.-based exporters export to over 220 countries around the world. And it was a sort of a technical guide on basically not just how to export, but how to stay compliant with all the different regulations around the world. And I had a research editor who said to me that this directory, while a lot of our subscribers may not refer to it very often, they have comfort and they sleep well at night because they know it's on the shelf. When they need it, it's there. It's more like an insurance policy. And that was a really great way to explain the value of that particular directory. So you can't guarantee that somebody's going to renew, but you can certainly make it, you can certainly improve your value proposition by ensuring that, from the time that you bring in a customer for the first time, that whole onboarding process is so important. You only get one opportunity to make a good first impression. And so you don't just want to send that customer maybe a templated form letter saying, hey, welcome to so-and-so. Here's your password and ID. You might actually want to reach out to them, especially if you look at the long-term lifetime value of that customer over a 10-year time horizon. You will see that customer, when they become more as a predictable renewal customer, it's just going to contribute more to the bottom line than having them around for 1 year and maybe overselling them and overpromising them something that you can't deliver.
And that effort really does make such a difference up front, because that, as you say, that investment is going to pay off. And not everybody will stay, but certainly if we're doing what they want us to do, if it fits in their expectations, we're doing nothing but creating every good chance for that to happen. Yeah. And I also really like the point you made about the export directory, because it's not always the direct or what we perceive as the direct value of the product that's necessarily going to keep people coming back. Sometimes, yes, I know there's value in the product. I appreciate the value, but there's value in other things, like the security of having it on the shelf. Even if I pull it off the shelf physically or virtually, if I do that once every 3 years, I don't care because it's right there. I have it. It's worth it.
That's right.
I've had customers that did the same thing. Just, it's an insurance policy. It's something that I know is there in case I need it. If I need to look at it quickly, if I need to get at it quickly, if I just am a little uncomfortable and want to do a little bit of a refresher, whether it's a data product or any sort of product where renewal is important, there might be many reasons why they renew that, again, or don't renew, that don't have to do with the product.
That's right. And, when you look at revenue streams in most businesses, regardless of what industry they're in or whether they're large or small, it's really that retained revenue that is really what is going to keep that business going. And it's certainly, as I said earlier, retained revenue, it's more predictable, it's certainly more durable, and it's certainly more profitable. So we, in my current position, we invest considerably in outreach to our customers. I actually created a new position back in 2015. It didn't exist anywhere in the company at the time. And it's just called a customer engagement manager. And, the person that I hired was just perfect for this role. He truly wants to delight customers, and he loves meeting with them, whether it's face-to-face in their particular workplace, which in many cases is academic institutions or healthcare institutions like hospitals or clinics. And what we just want to do is keep our customers engaged. We've actually created a quarterly newsletter that our marketing team works with our customer engagement team on producing. It's not a sales vehicle. We're not promoting product. We're just reaching out to customers. We do interviews with medical librarians, because most of our decision makers and those that have the purchasing authority in these institutions are medical librarians. So we do interviews with medical librarians, and the other librarians love to hear what some of their counterparts are doing in different parts of the country. So when I made the decision to bring this customer engagement manager role into the organization, it's interesting. Our retained revenue rates at that time were about 94%. They weren't bad at all. They were quite good.
Yeah, that's fabulous.
But I knew from previous roles that I had in medical publishing that we could probably improve that a little bit. And so I set a target of just 2 points of improvement, not in the first year, but maybe by the second year, I thought we could actually improve that retained revenue rate by 2 points. And we did better than that. We're averaging now 97.5% retained revenue rates.
Wow, that's phenomenal.
And I attribute that not only to the fact that we publish really valuable and needed clinical research, but also because we do make it a priority to ensure that our customers are getting good value. And we have all sorts of diagnostics and dashboards that we look at regularly, and we are very, very proactive. I've built risk models in the past that can actually predict when a customer is likely to not renew. And the key is not to wait until about 90 days before that renewal date. You want to get in there, you want to get in there at least 6 to 9 months before that renewal date, because then you have time to actually plan and create that and execute that plan, working with the customer to try to get their internal constituents, who are often doctors or perhaps residents, or maybe even researchers. And so it works, but it does start with a philosophy of, we don't just want to satisfy customers, we want to delight our customers, and we are constantly proving and improving the value proposition.
And so a couple really good things in there. And we are talking with Joe Douress today. He's the head of sales, marketing, and customer engagement for British Medical Publishing of the Americas. And Joe, what I heard there were a couple things. One of them is just that ongoing commitment to delivering real value and understanding what that means to the market. What does real value mean to them? Maybe it is a customer engagement manager. We used to have a story in our class about a client who implemented customer engagement and how it turned their business around too. Like you said, it's not a one size fits all, but that whole idea of what's meaningful to them, I think, is really important. And also, you mentioned that you can't wait until the last minute to worry about retention. And I like the fact you mentioned building models that not only indicated likelihood of drop or customers at risk in that 60 to 90 day period where salespeople start picking up the mantle of thinking, what are we going to do client by client, but also this 6 months, 9 months before the renewal is going to happen, trying to look for signals in the data there that say, yeah, you know what, there's some sort of data here that indicates they could be at risk, and you have time to fix it. Whereas, yeah, if you just call them 60 days out, probably what they're going to say is, I'm not renewing because the only time I hear from you is when you want to renew.
Exactly. And, I've obviously experienced this more often than I'd like to remember with some sales reps who would do exactly that. They would contact their customer 30 to 60 days before the renewal date, and the customer would say, well, I'm not going to renew. And then when you ask why, they will say, because I'm just not getting the usage that I expected. I'm not getting the value that I expected. It's too late by that point. It's absolutely too late. And then the sales rep would, blame it on lack of value. But the reality is it was lack of engagement on the part of the account manager.
Mm-hmm. And, we expect a lot from our sales teams. They generally have so many accounts, and I know from personal experience, as you've led so many sales teams, that they can't always call ahead. And so maybe we do need to add resources like a customer engagement manager, or at least share with the reps the implications of waiting too long, that you've got to at least get a couple calls in there somewhere to make sure they understand that you're available to answer questions if they have them. Some people don't have any questions, or don't they're okay without the interaction, but no matter what, people like to know that you're checking in and just making sure that things are okay.
Well, that's exactly right. And I can't emphasize enough how important it is from the onboarding of a new customer. And this goes beyond, depending on what you're bringing to market, whether it's a software product or any type of product. This goes beyond just, the training. This is all about monitoring that customer's usage throughout the year. And when training is necessary, absolutely provide that type of training. But it's also working with your marketing partners who can actually develop any number of different campaigns that provide support to increase that usage. Sometimes in our business, these medical librarians, they have very important roles within whether it's academic or a med school or a hospital, very important roles. They are really a central repository for all this clinical research. And you can imagine how important that is right now with the coronavirus pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what our marketing team will do is actually create campaigns that the medical librarian then can deploy internally to just remind everyone of these really valuable medical journals that are available online through the institution's library or from an internal portal. So we're actually partnering with the customer to try to socialize the benefits of all these assets, these different journals, and this critical information.
Well, and I think that's a great point too, because there is often, and particularly in the journal business, often in many businesses, there's a real difference between the buyer and the user, and the buyer needs to make sure that the user is getting value out of it.
That's
And
exactly right.
so your librarian, while they're certainly a user, they're almost more like an administrator. And you've got all these other people who could or should be using the product, but there's awareness on that end too. You've got this complex value chain, as well as, not to mention, the people who are also then contributing to the journals and keeping the reputation of the journal up. It's a very complex value chain to keep renewals going in. And it really does take that team effort to make sure that not only are you interacting with the buyer, the librarian, the administrator, but also then making sure they can interact with their users to drive and deliver that value.
That's exactly right.
Well, Joe, this has been a great discussion of customer retention and just a great perspective. Also a bit of a walk down memory lane, because some of those things you were talking about, I remember the good times and I remember the not so good times.
Yeah, well, the good news is as we get a little older, we start forgetting the bad times and we just remember the good times.
That's right. And I think that's the best way to go, because we've learned the lessons, we've absorbed the lessons. Let's just forget the rest of it, because honestly, there's so much there. I think this was just great. So thank you very much for being here today on the Pragmatic Institute podcast. This is Diane Pierson, and I hope everyone has a great day.